What's a real-life example of foreshadowing that has happened to you? When my mom was a child, she wished for a monkey. I'm her first child, my sign in the Chinese zodiac is monkey. When I was a child I wished for a horse, my son was born in the year of the horse. Before I was diagnosed with T1 diabetes my friends noticed that I was skinnier than normal, which didn't make sense. I was incredibly hungry all the time, ate more than I ever had in my life, and I was exhausted without reason. My vision deteriorated a year before I was diagnosed and I remember often feeling dizzy and tired after eating large meals almost a year before I was diagnosed. I remember my friend telling me to go to a doctor, but I said I was fine and I had no family history of diabetes so I didn't think anything was wrong. I basically had all the symptoms, but didn't realize that there was a problem. I honestly thought that since I was eating so much maybe I had developed T2 diabetes even though I wasn't more than 120 pounds soaking wet when I was diagnosed. T1 diabetes sucks. The mother of my child saying, "I can't get pregnant, I know my body." I remember a few years back when my grandmother said I would be an engineer. At the time I wanted to be an artist, I was like 12, and had no interest in any field of engineering. Well now in 2021 I'm getting into automotive engineering with great interest. Edit, I was kinda expecting someone to do the Star Wars quote, "We will watch your career with great interest." I was in a class during undergrad, listening to a peer talk about his internship experience, where a child had spit blood at him. And I remember thinking fuck. 2 years later, I had graduated and was applying for jobs in my very rural area, and that was the first job offered to me, about 5 months after graduating. I took it, and I loved it. It inspired me to go to grad school, actually, and now I'm a pretty kick-ass child therapist. Scientists warning us about global warming. I work as a therapist now. When I was in college, I was volunteering at a clinic, and heard 2 counselors describe a complicated and difficult case. I remember thinking, that person seems really tough, man, I'm glad I'm not that clinician. When I was in grad school I was interning at a different clinic, and one of the counselors was describing a complex and difficult client, the same one from a few years before. I remember thinking that person seems really tough, man I'm glad I'm not that clinician. In my first job after school, I was working in a completely different clinic. One of my first intakes was that same very complex and difficult client. Well, son of a bitch. COVID. I was drinking at my mate's house for New Year's Eve 2019, and we were all too loud, so his mother comes downstairs, in just her underwear, starts shouting at us all and telling us all off. Then her other son started shouting because she was shouting. I turned to my BF and I jokingly said to him, "Well, that sets the tone for the rest of this year then." Little did I know, it actually did set the tone for the rest of 2020. A couple months ago I was hiking alone, and just kinda lost in thought. Had a sudden intrusive thought to myself saying I'm probably going to meet a girl here soon. We'll probably end up dating for a really long time. And a month or so later I met my current GF. She is great, more or less everything I've ever wanted in a partner. No real explanation as to why that thought popped in my head thought. When I told a random guy he's going to die by my hands. We need to talk when you get home. When I was 10 my mom accidentally ran over my 4-month-old cat with her bike. We found him hiding in the bush and he was fine, but from that day I knew his time was limited. I loved him more than any cat before him. About a year later he got run over. In high school a girl told me fuck you. 3 years after graduation, she did. I remember driving one day and thinking to myself, it's only a matter of time before I get in an accident, because drivers where I live are so shitty. This was probably in 2015 or so. Sure enough, January 2016, I got into an accident and my car was totaled. I live in NYC where the film crews can just tow your vehicle and drop it somewhere random. I couldn't find parking as there was a major studio filming. I was talking to a neighbor and he told me about the filming and whatnot. He said be careful even if you don't park where they say not to, they've towed my car before. I said haha yeah sure they will. I parked more than a mile away from their set and when I went to go to work they had moved my truck about 2 blocks over. I reported it stolen and was hysterical when the cops arrived and told me this happens all the time. One officer had it happen to him personally. Fuck film crews. TLDR, I thought my truck got stolen but some asshole film crew had it towed elsewhere. My husband and I met on a kids' social networking website in the mid-2000s. The name of the chat room we met in was called The Beach. 10 years later we got married off the coast of Florida, and it didn't occur to me until just recently we met on a beach and then had a beach wedding. Life can be funny. My mom has weird dreams sometimes. One day she reminded me that just because the car in front of you is moving forward doesn't mean that the light is green. Pay attention to your surroundings. This was super weird and random to me, but whatever, dreams are dreams. A couple days later though, I was at a red light and the cars in front of me shifted forward, so I did too, so there wouldn't be a massive gap between me and the car in front of me. Next thing you know, the car behind me decided to hit my car. It turns out they weren't paying attention and assumed the light was green because I was moving forward. They were on their phone, SMH. Seems a little coincidental to me. This is very recent. I started having dreams about death and sickness a lot. Then in one dream, I saw my grandfather. He was in the hospital at the time, and I was very nervous and scared for him. Every day I would try calling him, but the phone never rang. I knew he was going to die very soon. About a week later, he passed. Even though he was sick, no one but me really saw this coming. It's a scary thought. Another foreshadow that comes to mind was when I was in a suicidal place. I thought about dying and thinking about how I would die. Then I wondered what would happen if I got into a coma. I kept thinking about comas a lot. Suddenly, my friend texts me that their girlfriend is in the hospital in a coma. They were hit by a truck, the way I was thinking about dying. I didn't know if it was because of me or not, highly unlikely, but I was so guilty. I then took back what I said about comas and death and wanted that person to just be okay. Well, a few days later, my friend's girlfriend comes out of her coma. I don't know as any of this can be called foreshadowing, but it does freak me out and make me think that I have some sort of bad luck. Not sure if this counts, but about a year and a half ago I started dating this girl in my dorm. We had such an immediate connection, it was crazy, although there was another guy on the dorm that I could tell was also into her. I remember sometime in the first few days thinking to myself that somehow that guy's going to lead to the demise of the relationship in the future. Not sure why it popped into my head, as I was friends with him at the time. Anyways, a couple months ago we broke up because she had been lying about talking and hanging out with him for the entire duration of our relationship. Sometimes your gut just picks up on cues that don't quite make sense yet, but they almost always fit into the puzzle later on. Feeling like I need to update my resume about a week before I was fired. Came out of the blue, too. Both the feeling and the firing, since things were going pretty great before being fired. I was in a really horrible school and my mom sent an email reclaiming about an incident that happened to me to the wrong school. After a time, I coincidentally got into that other school. Sorry for my bad English. Does dreaming about a certain event that actually happens count? It's like deja vu in a way. Husband is a black belt. Baby kicked the crap out of me in utero. Long before I decided to leave my husband, maybe 18 months before, I had this dream that I was sat in a car and telling him I had had enough and I was going far away and it's over. I left him in March 2020 and moved halfway across the country because lockdown and the prospect of being with him 24/7 wasn't a nice thought for me. Maybe not the same, but I often think of that dream. Not sure if this counts, but a couple of years after I got married I noticed a lot of things to do with our wedding had closed. The shop where I got my dress and the cake shop went first, then the photographer just disappeared, and lastly the venue shut. I used to joke with my husband that it was a sign. 3 years ago he left me after starting an affair, so I once stayed with a family for a few days during a school trip abroad. The family seemed very serious and strict. I on the other hand was always a go with the flow, relaxed kind of guy. They had 2 daughters and I remember distinctly thinking, man, I never want to have a family like that or be with a girl like the older sister, it would just destroy me on the inside. 9 years later and I'm happily married with the older daughter and on good terms with a family who loves me. Turns out the sister was a softie on the inside and so is the rest of her family. My mom had a name for my brother that she couldn't use in the end because my aunt, dad's side, had a dog with the same name. Fast forward 20 years. Since I was a little girl, younger than 10, I've loved the name Sam, short for Sammy, never Samantha, for girls, and it's been the only name that has stuck with me as a future baby name. Last year my cousin, daughter of that aunt, got a dog and called it Sammy. It's a complete coincidence, my cousin didn't and wouldn't have known, but I'm still not over it.